Namaste. Sacred texts and traditions continue to be significant in the lives of people who belong to the world's religious traditions. The reason is that these texts and teachings, when properly read and interpreted in historical context, discuss ethical and human dilemmas that are universal and relevant across the passage of time. Such discussions provide guidance as we struggle with difficult moral choices in our own lives. One of the most widely shared traditions associates Diwali with the celebration and rejoicing over the return of Ram to his home in Ayodhya after an exile of 14 years and his defeat of the tyrannical Ravana. Citizens of Ayodhya joyfully welcomed Ram home by lighting thousands of earthen lamps. On the occasion of Diwali 2020, I want to turn to an ethical dilemma in the Ramayana faced by Vibhishana, the younger brother of Ravana. I have been thinking a lot about Vibhishana's predicament and his decision in light of the many people in the administration of Donald Trump who disagreed with policies and decisions of the president and who chose a different way of responding. The dilemma that I want to highlight, however, is not limited to persons in the Trump administration. It is present in different ways in governments across our world and in corporations, institutions, and families. What are our moral choices when we experience wrongdoing in those places where we work and live? How do we choose? Vibhishana's dilemma, as is well known in the Ramayana, arose from the decision of his brother Ravana, the ruler of Lanka, to forcibly abduct Sita, the wife of Ram, imprison and torture her into becoming one of his wives. It was a clear and violent moral transgression. This was the leader's personal decision, but like the personal decisions of many leaders, it endangered the state of Lanka. Ravana was not a leader who admitted error or who reversed a course of action. The consequence was that Rama's army was on the shores of Lanka and a war was imminent. In the face of this grave threat to the state of Lanka, Ravana quickly called a meeting of his cabinet and requested their advice. How did his cabinet officers respond? Some of them, I am certain, chose the option of silence, even though they were well aware of Ravana's unlawful and immoral behavior. They lacked the courage to speak truth, contravening a fundamental Hindu moral obligation. The Vedas exhort and instruct us to fearlessly speak the truth. Satyam Vada. The late John Lewis, fearless civil rights activist and member of the United States Congress, reminded us that this obligation is especially important when we witness injustice. When you see something that is not right, not just, not fair, said Lewis, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something. If some in Ravana's cabinet chose silence, others chose to speak words of flattery, offering exaggerated praise, telling him what he wanted to hear. Their words dripped with hypocrisy, since Ravana was praised only in his presence. Outside of his presence, we imagine that they were honest about the dangers to the state. They knew Ravana's flaws as a leader, but they put their own selfish concerns above their obligations to the common good. Tulsidas, author of one version of the Ramayana, offers a remarkably relevant insight on the predicament of a leader served by such persons. When a minister of government, a physician, or a religious leader, says Tulsidas, motivated by fear or hope of reward, speak words of flattery to a leader, the speedy outcome is the loss of power, health, and faith in religion. One of the causes for the loss of faith is religious leadership that is seduced by power and wealth, and that abandons the commitment to truth and human well-being. Public health is jeopardized, as we see in the case of COVID-19, when leaders rely on physicians who speak words of adulation and ignore truth and science. The loss of power is inevitable when a leader surrounds himself with sycophantic ministers. There were a few in Ravana's court who did not choose silence or flattery. Among these were his wife, Mandodari, and his younger brother, Vibhishana. Mandodari warned him privately, but he quickly dismissed her caring words with sexist comments about the cowardice of women and their disqualification for leadership. Sexism is not a modern phenomenon. Vibhishana, who was seated next to Ravana in the executive office, stood up and spoke truth to power with courage and fearlessness. He spoke to Ravana about the fundamental cause of the predicament facing Lanka, his immoral and illegal kidnapping of Sita. He implored him to avoid the disaster of a war by returning her to Ram and seeking reconciliation and peace. Vibhishana was a loyal member of Ravana's administration, but his loyalty was informed by a higher commitment to truth and to the well-being of the entire community. It was not a narrow loyalty to the head of state who happened to be a member of his family. It is through fear that your ministers dare not advise you, said Vibhishana. But I feel compelled to inform you of what I have seen and heard. Judge what you consider to be right and act accordingly. Those who make flattering speeches, added Vibhishana, are easy to find, but rare are those who utter beneficial, though unpleasing words, or those who will listen to them. Vibhishana, unlike other ministers of Ravana, spoke truth to power and did it in a timely manner. He did it openly in a cabinet meeting, in the presence of the head of state, and not quietly behind his back. He did not wait to speak out after he left the administration. He did not wait to write a book. Ravana's reaction is not unexpected. Overlooking the truth of Vibhishana's words, he accused him of disloyalty. Ravana judged the members of his cabinet by their loyalty to him and not by their commitment to truth or their capability. For leaders like Ravana, dissent is disloyalty. Having publicly spoken truth to power, Vibhishana could have quietly withdrawn. He could choose to be an observer and witness events from a safe distance. we would still regard his actions as heroic. It is the bold choice that he makes next that teaches and challenges us all today. Speaking truth to power was not enough for Vibhishana. In a conflict between good and evil, and where the side of justice is so clear, he could not remain neutral. He felt compelled to actively support the cause of righteousness. Vibhishana does so by leaving his home and offering himself in service to Ram, who he regarded as the exemplar of virtue. He felt a moral obligation to do what he could to ensure the victory of righteousness. Vibhishana's active support of Ram contributed to his victory over Ravana, his return to his home city of Ayodhya, and our celebration of Diwali today. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "He who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetrate it. He who accepts evil without protesting against it is really cooperating with it." Vibhishana is an early example, perhaps the earliest example in the Hindu tradition, of a person who felt that he could not accept evil passively or protest only with his words. He expressed his dissent by actively aligning himself with the forces of goodness. In the great moral struggles of our times for justice and for human dignity, in the face of systemic racism, poverty, sexism, lack of access to healthcare and education, let us not be silent and neutral. Silence, said Gandhi, becomes cowardice when the occasion demands speaking out the whole truth and acting accordingly. On this occasion of Diwali 2020, let us be inspired by the light that emanates from the bold example of Vibhishana to courageously stand for justice in both word and action. May all administrations welcome Vibhishanas, and may all leaders listen to them. I wish you and your families a very happy and safe Diwali 2020.